The second fire started before we'd even finished cleaning our gear from the first one. Dispatch called it in as an apartment blaze on the east side, but the second we turned onto Mercer Avenue, I knew the report was wrong. The whole block was burning. Flames rolled out of shattered third-floor windows like they were alive, climbing across the building faster than fire should have been able to move. People leaned out onto balconies, screaming for help, while blasts exploded into the street below. Smoke covered everything so thick it swallowed the floodlights from our engine. "Multiple victims trapped!" someone yelled over the radio. We deployed lines immediately, but nothing worked. The fire just kept spreading. And then, through the smoke, red lights appeared. By the third overnight shift in a row, the firehouse stopped feeling like a workplace and started feeling like someplace you survived. Everything smelled like smoke. Smoke in the bay, smoke trapped in our jackets, smoke baked into the walls from decades of calls and bad coffee and exhausted men trying to laugh through things they probably shouldn't have seen. I sat at the kitchen table staring into a mug that had gone cold an hour earlier, while rain tapped softly against the station windows. Miller walked past me toward the lockers, tugging suspenders over his station shirt. "You look dead," he said. "Feel worse." "That's the spirit." He disappeared into the bay while the rest of the crew shuffled around in varying stages of exhaustion. Lieutenant Harris stood near the weather monitor with his arms crossed, watching storm cells drift across the county radar. "City's gonna have a rough night," he muttered. Nobody argued. The tones dropped less than 10 minutes later. The sound hit the station like a lightning strike. Every firefighter knows that sound changes you instantly. Doesn't matter how tired you are. Your body moves before your brain catches up. "Engine 23, respond to a reported commercial structure fire, possible entrapment." Chairs scraped backward, boots hammered across concrete. The bay doors groaned open into the rain as we climbed aboard the engine. I pulled my headset on while Miller slammed the passenger door shut beside me. Dispatch continued feeding updates through static. "Multiple callers reporting explosions inside the structure." That got everyone's attention. Lieutenant Harris looked back from the officer's seat. "Chemical storage warehouse," he said. "Old industrial district." Nobody spoke after that. The rain intensified as we tore through downtown streets, red lights flashing across empty intersections and wet storefront windows. Even before we reached the district, we could already see the glow in the clouds ahead. Orange. Too big. "Jesus," Miller whispered. Then we turned onto Calder Street. The warehouse was fully involved. Flames punched through the roof in massive, rolling bursts, lighting up nearby buildings like daylight. Thick black smoke poured into the sky while smaller explosions boomed from somewhere deep inside the structure. Other companies were already there, lines deployed, ladders going up, police pushing civilians back. But the fire wasn't behaving normally. It spread too fast. One side of the warehouse would dim under water pressure, while another section erupted seconds later like something was moving through the building beneath the flames. "Hydrant pressure's dropping," somebody yelled over command. The aerial stream overhead weakened visibly. A section of roof collapsed inward with a deafening crash that shook the street beneath our boots. Lieutenant Harris pointed toward the east exposure. "Engine 23, protect that building! Move!" We advanced the hose line through blowing steam and falling embers while heat rolled across us hard enough to feel through the gear. Visibility dropped fast. Smoke swallowed everything beyond a few feet. I could barely see Miller beside me anymore. Then, through the haze, red emergency lights appeared. At first, I thought it was another responding company finally arriving, but as the engine pushed slowly through the smoke, something about it felt wrong immediately. Older body style, rounded cab, rotating beacon lights instead of modern strobes. The paint looked darker than ours beneath the soot coating the truck. And across the front grille, illuminated by firelight, were the words, Engine 14. I frowned behind my mask. I'd never heard of an Engine 14. The truck rolled past us without stopping. Its crew climbed out almost silently. Older turnout coats, black helmets, air tanks that looked decades out of date. Not one of them spoke. But the second they hit the ground, they moved like they already knew exactly where the fire was going next. The jokes started the second we got back to the station. Maybe we got ghost mutual aid now. Yeah? Ghost firefighters driving antique engines? Miller laughed as he stripped off his turnout coat, but nobody really joined in. The image of that engine rolling through the smoke stayed stuck in my head. Engine 14. Lieutenant Harris spent almost 20 minutes arguing with dispatch before finally slamming the radio down onto the kitchen counter. No department in the county uses that designation, he said. So who the hell was it? Miller asked. Harris didn't answer. That was the part bothering all of us. Nobody saw where they came from, and nobody saw where they went. The rest of the night settled into exhausted silence. Rain tapped against the station windows while gear dried beside humming fans in the bay. Then at 1:12 a.m., the tones dropped again. Every muscle in my body tightened instantly. Engine 23 responded to a confirmed residential structure fire, multiple occupants trapped. Lieutenant Harris looked toward the monitor as the address came across dispatch. Mercer Towers, he muttered. Nobody liked that. Old apartment high-rise, too many residents, too few exits. We pulled out into the rain with lights reflecting across flooded streets while dispatch continued updating the call. Multiple reports of civilians trapped on upper floors. The smoke became visible nearly 10 blocks away. Black, heavy enough to swallow half the skyline. Then we turned the final corner. The building was already fully involved. Flames rolled from broken windows while people screamed from balconies above the fire line. Glass shattered into the street below as police fought to hold crowds back behind barricades. The heat hit us before we even climbed off the engine. Lieutenant Harris grabbed the radio. Engine 23 making interior push. The lobby looked like hell. Smoke churned against the ceiling in thick black waves while alarms screamed through the building. Sprinklers hissed overhead, barely slowing anything down. We advanced into the stairwell with residents stumbling past us, coughing and crying. 4th floor, then 5th. The fire should have been below us. Instead, flames suddenly burst through an apartment doorway at the end of the hall. Everybody jumped backward. That's impossible, Miller shouted. The fire spread too fast, not natural fast, wrong fast, like it was moving through the walls ahead of us. The hallway temperature surged instantly. Paint blistered. Smoke thickened so quickly my flashlight barely cut through it. Then I heard another engine outside. Low diesel rumble. No siren. My stomach tightened immediately. I moved toward the hallway window and looked down through the smoke. Red rotating lights glowed below. Engine 14. Again. But this time it arrived before command requested additional companies, before anyone called Mayday, like they already knew. The old engine rolled to a stop outside the building while its crew climbed out almost silently. Dark turnout coats, old leather helmets, silver air tanks that looked decades out of date. One firefighter looked up directly toward our floor. Even through rain and smoke, I could see his cracked face shield. And behind the fractured glass, burned skin, blackened and split beneath the mask. Then the radio on my shoulder exploded into static. Not voices, just harsh crackling noise. Then beneath it, breathing. Slow, heavy. A distorted voice finally pushed through the static. East stairwell. Collapse in 30 seconds. Lieutenant Harris looked at me. What did it say? The floor beneath us groaned loudly. My blood ran cold. Move! Harris yelled. We barely made it into the stairwell before the hallway behind us collapsed into fire. Nobody spoke much on the drive back from Mercer Towers. Not after the collapse. Not after the radio warning. And definitely not after we reviewed the body cam footage. The hallway cameras caught the fire blowing out of the apartment. They caught us running for the stairwell. But every frame after that distorted into static, like interference had swallowed the recording whole. Lieutenant Harris replayed it 3 separate times in silence before finally shutting the laptop. "Equipment malfunction," he muttered. Nobody believed that either. The worst part was the timing. The warning came exactly 30 seconds before the collapse, not 29, not 35, exactly. And dispatch swore they never transmitted anything to our channel. By sunrise, word about the fire had spread across half the department. Somebody uploaded cell phone footage online showing the old engine parked outside Mercer Towers. The video quality was terrible. Rain, smoke, shaking camera. But the truck number was visible. Engine 14. Comments flooded the video within hours. Most people assumed it was an antique restoration truck. Others thought the footage was fake. Then shortly after noon, Lieutenant Harris got a phone call. I watched his expression change while he listened. Serious, then uncomfortable. Finally, "Yeah, all right, we'll come by." He hung up slowly. "Who was that?" Miller asked. Harris hesitated. "Retired captain named Arthur Dean." None of us recognized the name. "He says he knows what Engine 14 is." That got everybody's attention immediately. The rain still hadn't stopped by the time we drove across town later that evening. Captain Dean lived alone in a small brick house near the edge of the city, surrounded by overgrown hedges and rusting wind chimes that clattered softly in the storm. The old man opened the door before we even knocked. "You saw them," he said immediately. Not a question. His living room walls were covered in old fire department photographs, black and white station pictures, engine companies standing proudly beside trucks that looked ancient compared to modern rigs, and hanging near the hallway, a framed photo labeled Station 14, 1983. My stomach tightened. Same engine, same rounded cab, same red rotating lights. Dean noticed me staring. "They still look the same?" he asked quietly. Nobody answered. The old captain sat heavily into a chair near the window. "For years, people said they were rumors," he said. "Ghost stories firefighters tell probies." He rubbed tired eyes. "But every couple years, somebody sees them again." Lieutenant Harris folded his arms. "So who were they?" Dean looked toward the photograph. "Good firefighters." Silence settled over the room while rain tapped against the windows. Then Dean finally continued. "March 1983. Chemical warehouse fire near the River District. Station 14 was first due." His voice lowered slightly. "They lost contact with command less than 10 minutes after entering." "What happened?" I asked. Dean stared at the floor. "The building exploded." Nobody spoke. The entire crew died inside. Miller shifted uncomfortably. "Then why are people still seeing them?" The old captain looked up slowly. "Because after Station 14 disappeared, the fires changed." I frowned. "What do you mean, changed?" Dean leaned back heavily. "Firefighters started reporting strange behavior during major incidents. Fires spreading too fast, burning against airflow, flashovers happening where they shouldn't." His eyes moved toward us carefully. "And sometimes, right before firefighters got trapped," he paused, "they showed up." A chill crawled up my spine. Dean stood slowly and walked toward a small cabinet near the wall. After digging through old folders, he handed Harris a yellowed newspaper clipping. Abandoned firehouse to be demolished. Below the headline sat a photograph of Station 14. Boarded windows, collapsed roof, condemned decades ago. "There's something else," Dean said quietly. He pointed toward the address printed beneath the article. I felt my stomach drop again. The station sat less than 2 miles from Mercer Towers, and directly beside the old industrial warehouse district where our first fire happened. The next fire started less than 24 hours later. By then, none of us were sleeping much. Every radio burst made my stomach tighten. Every set of red lights in the distance made me think about Engine 14. And somewhere in the back of my mind, one thought kept replaying over and over. They always arrive before things get worse. The tones dropped just after midnight. "Multiple alarms, industrial fire near the River District." Lieutenant Harris looked toward me immediately. River District. Same area as the Station 14 disaster. Rain hammered the windshield as Engine 23 tore through downtown streets. We could already see the glow ahead reflecting off the clouds. Orange, huge. Then we crested the bridge overlooking the district, and everybody in the cab went silent. The refinery was burning. Entire storage tanks stood engulfed in flame while black smoke rolled thousands of feet into the sky. Smaller explosions rippled across the yard, shaking nearby buildings hard enough to rattle windows half a mile away. The whole skyline looked on fire. Mutual aid from 3 neighboring departments was already responding. Engines crowded the streets while ladder trucks sprayed water from every direction. But none of it was slowing the fire down. It kept spreading, against the wind. Lieutenant Harris stared through the windshield. "That's not possible," he muttered. Then dispatch started screaming over the radio. "Units evacuate the South Yard immediately. Repeat, evacuate." A fireball erupted across one of the storage lines. The shockwaves slammed against our engine. We barely got out before a chain of secondary explosions tore through the refinery behind us. For a second, all I could hear was ringing. Then, through the smoke, red rotating lights appeared. Engine 14. The old truck rolled slowly through the haze while firefighters from other departments stopped and stared. Its crew climbed out silently, like always. Dark turnout coats soaked black with rain and soot. Old silver tanks, cracked helmets. But this time I could see them clearly. Their gear was burned, not stained, burned. Melted along the edges like they'd walked straight through an inferno. One firefighter turned toward me as he passed. Part of his face showed beneath the broken mask. Blackened skin, cracked like charcoal. But his eyes looked exhausted more than dead, like a man who'd been fighting the same fire for decades. Then I realized something worse. Engine 14 wasn't attacking the main blaze. They were surrounding one specific section of the refinery, containing it. Inside the smoke beyond them, shapes moved. At first, I thought they were firefighters. Then one of the figures stretched upward, unnaturally tall, before vanishing back into the flames. My blood ran cold. "What the hell was that?" Miller whispered. Nobody answered. The fire suddenly surged outward again, roaring high enough to light the entire riverfront orange. And inside the flames, I saw silhouettes moving, human-shaped, walking slowly through the fire. Lieutenant Harris grabbed my shoulder hard. "We're pulling out!" But before we could move, one of the firefighters from Engine 14 stepped directly in front of us. He looked at Harris first, then at me. For the first time, one of them finally spoke. His voice sounded distorted beneath the mask, like air pushing through burned lungs. "Don't let it leave." Then he turned and disappeared back into the flames. The final fire started at 3:11 a.m. Dispatch sounded panicked before the tones even finished dropping. "Multiple explosions reported at the old Riverside chemical site. All available companies respond." Lieutenant Harris looked toward me immediately. Nobody had to say it. This was where Station 14 died. Rain hammered the bay doors as Engine 23 pulled into the street. The city skyline glowed orange ahead of us long before we reached the river district. By the time we arrived, the entire complex was burning. Not the refinery above it, the ground itself. Flames erupted from collapsed concrete foundations while black smoke poured upward through cracks in the earth like something underneath the site was trying to breathe. Police had already established a perimeter, but firefighters from half the city stood outside the collapse zone, uncertain what to do. The fire didn't behave normally anymore. It moved. Entire sections of flame crawled sideways against the rain, spreading through flooded pavement and wrapping around abandoned structures without consuming them. Lieutenant Harris stared at the scene silently. Then the radio crackled. Static, heavy breathing, and finally, Engine 14 responding. Every firefighter nearby froze. Through the smoke at the far edge of the site, red rotating lights appeared. The old engine rolled slowly into view one last time. This time, nobody questioned it. Nobody even spoke. The crew stepped out into the rain, their burned gear dripping black water across the pavement. Up close, they barely looked human anymore. Charred gloves, cracked masks, melted helmets. But they moved with purpose. One of them pointed toward a collapsed access tunnel near the center of the site. Lieutenant Harris looked at me. That's where it started. The tunnel descended beneath the old chemical facility into darkness filled with smoke and flashing orange light. And somewhere below us, something moved. The deeper we pushed underground, the hotter the air became. Pipes screamed overhead while alarms echoed through flooded corridors coated in soot. Then we found the old station remains. Half buried beneath collapsed concrete sat melted helmets and air tanks fused into the floor. Engine 14 never escaped this place. They died down here trying to contain whatever had started the fire. And it was still burning. At the end of the final corridor, flames rolled upward from the massive rupture in the ground. But inside the fire, shapes moved. Tall, distorted, human silhouettes twisting inside the smoke. Not burning. Watching. Miller took a step backward. What the hell is that? Nobody answered. Then one of the firefighters from Engine 14 stepped forward beside me. The same burned firefighter who'd warned us before. For the first time, he removed his mask completely. His face looked blackened beyond recognition, skin split and burned away from old scars that should have killed him decades ago. But his eyes were calm, tired. "We held it here," he said quietly. The fire behind him surged violently against the walls. "You have to finish it." Lieutenant Harris immediately understood. The suppression system. Old emergency flood controls still lined the tunnel walls near the rupture. If we triggered them manually, the entire underground section would collapse and bury the fire permanently. But somebody had to stay behind to activate it. Before Harris could speak, the firefighters from Engine 14 moved past us toward the flames, returning to their positions. Like they'd done this every night for 40 years. The burned firefighter looked back at me once, then gave a small nod. We ran. The tunnel shook violently as Harris triggered the emergency system overhead. Sirens erupted through the underground corridors while massive steel doors slammed shut behind us. Then the collapse began. Concrete thundered downward. Flames disappeared beneath choking clouds of smoke and dust. And deep below the earth, the fire finally went dark. By sunrise, rain still fell across the ruins of the chemical site. Exhausted crews stood silently in the street, watching smoke drift upward from the collapsed ground. No sign of Engine 14 remained. No truck, no crew, nothing. Then I looked down at the wet pavement beside Engine 23. Fresh tire tracks cut through the ash-covered street. leading away from the scene. The radio on my shoulder crackled softly one final time. Static. Then a tired voice. Engine 14 returning to quarters. Silence followed. And somewhere far off in the rain, I thought I heard an old diesel engine fading into the dark. If there's one thing firefighters learn fast, it's that some calls stay with you forever. But maybe some firefighters do too. Engine 14 never made it home that night in 1983, and maybe that's why they still answer the calls no one else can. So the next time you hear sirens outside your window late at night, or see red lights moving through smoke where no engine should be, just hope they're still out there. Because if Engine 14 is responding, something worse is already burning. If you enjoyed tonight's story and want more dark mystery, institutional horror, and late-night stories like this, make sure you subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories. We're getting closer to the next big milestone, and every single subscription genuinely helps the channel grow and keeps these stories coming. And if you made it all the way to the end, let me know down in the comments. Would you follow Engine 14 into the fire? Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next story.